Twilight, tell us when you first heard about the Peace Camp.
Well, Shad asked me if I wanted to drive around looking at land, at properties. So actually we went around searching for some land. She said that various organizations were getting together and we're going to purchase a piece that hopefully was next to the Seneca Army Depot. And I remember we went to Seneca Lake, where there had used to be owned by the Navy there, and I don't know, a couple other little things. And I think we also went to where the Peace Camp is, so that was one of the strong possibilities. I was living in Almond, New York, in the southern tier, and I knew Shad from Buffalo, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because we're both from Buffalo, New York. Anyway, they were probably going to buy the land that was, or is now, was part of the encampment. And I went back in June to see what was happening. And Michelle Crone was on the land. And she said, we're expecting, you know, a lot of women here, and we're setting up this camp, and we have a month to go, we're opening, and we're like desperate, and can you help with anything? So I went and helped with Joni and Beverly from Penn Yan with some plumbing and a couple of things a couple of times. And then I asked her, well, what are you doing for any kind of medical or herbal? And Crone said, oh yes, we're going to have a medical room. We have some herbs. And she pulled out this shoebox. And I go, well, you're expecting hundreds of people and you have a shoebox here? I said, you're going to need more than that, and to stay here all summer. And she goes, you want to help me or help us with this? That would be great. So I got completely sparked about it. I totally got dedicated. So I went to every herb place and every health food store, every co-op in Buffalo, which there were 4, Rochester, I think I even stopped in at Syracuse, and had donations from all kinds of places and brought in, it eventually was probably over 100 herbs, I think, maybe 75 to 100 herbs that I got donated. And then various nurses had been contacted both by me and other people, and they brought in things, and we had all kinds of medicines and every kind of medical process you'd need. And anyway, somehow ended up then running the herbal room, or I called it the healing room. So kind of created it, then ended up staffing it. And there were a few people that I could call for references, but basically I had people working under me, including nurses and doctors, and I was only an herbalist in nursing school, so but somehow I ended up running the whole thing. And I remember during the opening ceremony that I was making clay while people were speaking, because the well had been dug, I think 240 feet or something like that, and all this beautiful fine gray clay had been brought up out of the land. So I was taking it and straining it and making mounds of clay, so I had clay for bites. Little did I know that the English woman would come and get mosquito bites, which they don't have the likes of which there, and they would have these welts on their legs. So I took the clay and I made with plantain, I made this very strong tea and put green, so I made like a green clay and put it on their huge mosquito bites, the biggest I've ever seen. Those British women would lift up their skirts, they'd be like boom, 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 and their legs would be covered with huge spots, or people had poison ivy. So I couldn't believe it. I used every ounce of that clay that summer in the healing room. And I was pretty much busy from morning till usually probably close to midnight, and rarely had breaks, rarely had lunch, occasionally had dinner when people remembered to bring me a meal, which didn't always happen.
What kind of people showed up at the healing room, and what kinds of things were needed?
Well, I remember I had to put a call into Rochester to send down crutches, and they called back and said, "Do we have this right? You need crutches?" And I said, "Yeah," because they had rented the pasture out at one point to the Amish people who had cows in there, so there were huge ruts all over the land. And in a very short period of time, I think in a 3-week period, we had about 3 breaks and about 3 to 4 or 5 sprains of ankles, and there was a disabled contingency for the August 1st civil disobedience, and half of them were disabled from the land. So that was just one thing. I was taking people to the hospital probably 4 or 5 times at least, maybe more than that. I had people that had mental illnesses, and they brought them over to me, and I'm like, okay. There was one woman who was, I think the base had dropped her off at the camp, and she was a little out of her mind, like probably had schizophrenia. She ran next door to the mobile home park and was saying she was the Avon lady, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. So we had a few things like that happened. So more than a few, it was a lot. Then I had people who had falls, hypoglycemic unconsciousness, poison ivy to the point of swells that their legs were like almost twice their size. Took her to the hospital. Somebody had fallen off the roof at one point during the summer and hurt his shoulder. It was a guy, actually, and I helped him. One of my people in the healing room who'd come in for some cuts she'd had from being arrested and whatever, and she was a married old nun, and she said, and she wrote me a letter and said that thank you for helping me at the camp and whatever, and I remember your your assistance. And she said, and when I was there, I bought a Question Authority bumper sticker, and I have it on my door at the convent, and can you please send 6 other ones for my other sisters in solidarity? Because I didn't like it too much that she had the Question Authority bumper sticker on her door. People would show me their ankle and be like twisted in an odd way I've never seen before. I didn't think was humanly possible. So I was like, you have to get an x-ray. And it turned out it was a sprain. And then when the foot looked fine, but she said, well, I'm not sure it feels that good. That was often a break. And so there were 3 broken ankles. And I made people go get x-rayed, even when they said, no, I don't, and I was like, we need to be sure. And I started to be able to get good hunches about it. The more weird it looked, usually it was a strain. And the least likely, it was like, that's possibly a break. At least good to find out. And so, yeah, I used that. Also, someone helped me with one woman who was dropped off at the property who had been schizophrenic. I think had stopped in the Army base or whatever. Somehow, somebody said they saw the Army drop her off.
Is this still 83?
Yeah, it was 83. And after dealing with her, and one woman had helped me who was a counselor. And so she helped me deal with her a lot, and we figured out, she made a bazillion calls, and she was super helpful. And it was an exhausting whole day and evening dealing with her. And this other woman helped me a lot. I can't remember her name. And she said, well, there's just one thing. can I show you something? And I said, okay. And she pulls up her skirt, and her legs had ballooned out from an allergic reaction to poison ivy. And I go, oh my gosh, you know, that looked like if you go into, it could be more serious, you could have trouble breathing. And I gave her my raspberry clay combination with plantain and gave her some tea, raspberry tea and some other stuff. And it was, I got a little scared about it, and I said, you know, because we could see it was getting worse. It started to get worse, and it started to get a little bit better, but I was like, you know, let's take you to the hospital. So we took her to the hospital, and she had a shot. They made her, they looked at her legs, they said, wash that shit off, and they made her take a hot shower and gave her a shot of Benadryl. When she came back, she said, you know, the clay and the stuff you gave me was way better, and now I feel worse. And so we just kept working with that. So I was up with her till most of the night. And she was much better. She was pretty much better by the morning, but actually she had gotten worse after the hospital, so I had to really work with her. And she's the one that helped me. But yeah, there were a lot of those kind of things. There was a woman that came in also that was passing out from being hypoglycemic. And I had to watch her careful quite a bit and give her, she said she didn't want to be taken to the hospital. She said, don't take me. And so I was trying to give her things like some nutritional yeast and some little bit of drops of juice or something. And so we've kind of figured out what would help her, and I tried to get her to take more food regular, and you know, and somebody had found a little trophy at a garage sale, and we gave out awards one night about the most frequent user of the healing room. And she got the trophy for the most frequent visits to the healing room. I think it was like a bowling trophy or something. We had to have fun sometimes. And we did actually. Fun. I also even adopted a kitty who every morning would wait for me to come to the healing room, and then she would come up to me and walk in with me and would always talk to me. And she's the only cat I would allow in there, and she would sit on the massage table or healing room, and she hung out for hours with us almost every day and every morning. And then I took her home. I named her Sassafras after the herbal room, which got shortened to Sassy because she was kind of sassy, and she always talked back to me. We had both the healing room, and then we had a side little room called the witch's room. And so I had a bed in there at one point, and so people could lie down and rest or whatever. And then I had a huge run on the usual when you have a lot of people together, diarrhea. It was like, I learned really quickly. You put carob with some water, and I was giving people all that and dealing with that, and it was one crisis after another, and then there was a broken ankle again, and then there was like, I was really busy. I was
Do you
really
have much help?
No, at first I couldn't find anybody who would help me, because everybody was saying, no, I'm going swimming, I'm going to the action. I was the only one that didn't have a tan that summer. I had no color because I was indoors till midnight. Unless I got a little moonshine. Not that kind. So, yeah, I found a woman who was kind of upset sitting outside, and she was crying, and I asked her what was the problem and could I help her with anything, and she said nobody will let me work, and the clipboard ladies are controlling the office. And I said, I really need a helper really bad in the healing room. She goes, well, what do you do in there? Anyway, she said, well, I don't know a thing about it. So I said, I'll train you, I'll teach you. So I took her under my wing, and she was my total dedicated assistant, and I totally needed her. Her name's Diane, and she lives in Vermont now, Burlington. And she since became like a pagan priestess and loves herbs, and so she was really happy that she had kind of apprenticed in the herbal room with me, because we were making tinctures and various concoctions and simples, which are steeped herbs and things, oils, and then occasionally people brought things in.
And teas.
And teas and poultices and yeah. And I got good at making different mixtures for cramps and different things. I kind of invented some formulas while I was there, actually, of different herbal mixtures. But I kind of missed I did go to the gate and do some things, but I wasn't as active in the action as I was really the behind the scenes healer, and people thought I was a workaholic because I pretty much was for that time. One thing that was really influential to me were all these women were there from all over the world who didn't have a lot of money, but were traveling everywhere and doing everything and not really working. And I'm like, how do they do it? I had been kind of really stuck in kind of a real poverty mentality. And when I really, really saw that people were really empowering themselves, and some really beautiful people doing some wonderful things, and they would come in after their actions and talk to me, or come in with sores or different problems, or they cut themselves on the fences or whatever. And so I would hear the behind the scenes stories of what happened, but different people from all over the world, or they'd just been to Mexico, or they were from Greenham or England or Italy, and it was so fascinating to me. And so it really changed my consciousness that I too could do anything, go anywhere. I could be empowered to help make changes, as well as not be impoverished and be stuck in my own little rut of I can't afford X, Y, or Z. So I started to think that I could afford to do anything I wanted. And I learned that from the Peace Camp. I pretty much really got it, because I had grown up fairly poor for American standards anyway. I mean, I had to have jobs when I was 12 to get clothes, or I didn't get clothes, or I had 3 jobs. And so I grew up with a very different, like, very tight about money. And it was from the Peace Camp that I decided to go to India. It moved me, it changed me, and the sense of community that I had there, I felt really empowered to be of help. Like, I didn't need to be in the front lines. I didn't need to get arrested. I just wanted to be part of what I was doing at that point. And that really gave me a sense of belonging and purpose, and I felt like a true healer, even though I wasn't barely in nursing school. I'm not even sure I was in nursing school yet. But I'd studied herbs, and I just wanted to do it. And I was actually an astrologer, but I wasn't really doing astrology per se. I was really doing herbals and healing, and yes, sometimes massage, sometimes adjustments.
So how late into the summer did you stay?
I stayed till, I think it was about, maybe it was even late August. I actually had to start nursing school, and I actually started late. I remember I told them I started late because I was at an action. They were too happy about that. So, it was a radical shift. I couldn't believe that I went from this hundreds of women, a lot of them lesbian, to a little town in Hornell, New York, to go to nursing school, which people had never been out of the county. And I was like, I was in quite a bit of shock. And I remember I got cultural and every which way. I go from day and night women and singing and campfires and healing and herbs and alternative, and I had the freedom to make any mixtures of things, and I got really creative with the herbs and making and started to research more things, and I got into it quite a bit, actually. I made different concoctions for specific ailments that were repeated, and just had fun with that. And then I go to nursing school. It was like, and I was like, felt like I was in the army myself. And it was shocking. And I remember I got sick when I left. I had bronchitis, and I was sick for probably a month or something after I left the peace camp. Plus, I was worn out, underfed. I was skinny. I was like just maybe 107 pounds or something like that when I left the peace camp, because I hadn't eaten. I would go back to the back fields and try to have dinner. And it would be dark, and I'd be like, okay, what's here? And it would be, the rice isn't cooked again, or the beans aren't cooked, or there's no food. There's nothing there. I was like, oh, look at it. And somebody say, well, I'll give you a banana I have. So I would have a banana for dinner. And then I remember I was eating a banana in the living room, and somebody had called up and said that somebody had sprained their ankle and be ready for them. And because I was sitting in the living room, this was about 11 at night, eating my dinner banana, and a woman comes in and goes, why are you sitting down? Aren't you ready for this patient who's coming in? And she was giving me a hard time, and I was like, I just sat down for a minute. It's the first time I sat down all day. All day I would work. All day. All day. I was just completely lost in that work, and it really needed like about maybe 5 people full time. And I was probably doing about 3 people's full time's work, and my assistant was probably doing like 1.5. And then the other people had to fend for themselves.
So did you stay in nursing school?
I was going back, and as it turned out, I couldn't handle the change, the extreme change from radical lesbian, although not everybody was lesbian, but radical, political, open, huge consciousness to this narrow, confined school. So actually I went back to school for about 3-4 months that semester, and then I quit. And then I moved back to the peace camp. Okay, so I'm leaving I'm thinking of this high, wild campfires and singing and all this energy. And in fact, one time when I helped, we were making the shitters in the backfield, and we needed electric, and it wasn't in the generator or whatever we had, I think it was a generator, wasn't working. It wasn't working. I said, let's circle it, let's circle it. So we circled around it, we sang some songs, and we gave it some juice, and I think Doobie Wild was with me, if I'm not mistaken. And we just kept doing it and doing it. We're going to do it, and we got it working. And then another time, we did the same thing to get the lights out at the Q zone. Were you with me then, Estelle?
No, but tell about that, because weren't there there were quite a few women?
There were a bunch of women, and we decided to try to make the lights go out at the Q zone, and so we chanted and focused and prayed, and we just put out a lot of magic about it, and it happened. So that was...
And did not just those lights go off, but the whole...
I think the base went a little dry for a little while.
All the lights went off in the base.
And we were like, woohoo!
Good work. Good work.
Yeah, we did a few things. So I guess I did get out of the room once in a while. Okay, so I had just had this really high community and women power, and I'm quitting this oppressive nursing school that's run by an ex-army nurse and like who was flirting with me, and I couldn't stand going to school anymore. And I get there, and everybody's like, oh, we're been snowed in, and it was like 3 or 4 people, and we're expected to do like 100 things as if we have 100 women here, and people were kind of depressed, and they were kind of sad, and I was like, so I threw my shirt off and grabbed the drumsticks, and I said, wild dance party, and I started hitting up.
You originated the wild dance party.
I originated the wild dance party.
Who was there? Do you remember the names of the women?
Hans,
Asia.
probably. I think Leanne. Was it Donna, maybe?
Jody.
You know, who was the woman that moved to LA? I don't know if Jody was there. There was
Andrea.
there was a woman
not Andrea
who
Jones.
had manic depression, and she was kind of depressed. And so it was that's what it was like. Okay, we needed to get the energy moving, and
I want to hear how you and Leanne get together.
there were, lots of nice experiences there. And yeah, I end up hanging out with Leanne, who was very nice but very Catholic worker. And I thought, woo, she's pretty straight. And I don't know, one night we're at the campfire, and and we're sitting there, and I don't know what overcame me. I pulled at her and kissed her, and then I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "Excuse me." I was like, I don't know what came over me, and she said, "I didn't mind." Anyway, I guess she'd kind of think she'd had a crush on me for a little while, and I was always teasing her. Well, I was making teas because she worked in the office, so we often met in the kitchen because I was doing my herbals or whatever, and she was in there, and she was living there in the winter, and I decided to move back kind of to be with her, and we had become lovers the very end of the summer, actually. And so then I moved back to the camp, partly to be with Leanne, partly to be with community, and just continue and do work. And I started to do a lot of Leanne did a lot of organizing. I filled in a lot of pieces. It wasn't easy because we were upstairs and there wasn't any heat upstairs too much, and we had the wood stove. So I learned a lot about using a wood stove and that kind of thing. I remember when I moved to the camp and someone said to me, "Well, you can't live here because you don't have a job." And I'm like, what do you mean I don't have a, and everybody had their different authority. And so it was quite a shock to be going there from this wild summer experience, which I even saw Aurora Borealis in the one August night at the Peace Camp. It was phenomenally beautiful out on the boardwalk, and sometimes after working I would just go and sit out in the middle of the field or be out at a campfire for a while to wind down. And it was just I remember even doing one time dancing. We did contact improv dancing with people at night, and just wonderful things like that. So when I get back there, and it was such a shock, and people were kind of contractive, and we had to deal with our personal shit, and it was like, oh, this one's controlling, and this one's grumpy, and this one's, it's like, you didn't have that in the summer because it was all like flying high, and I was like, wow, this is heavy. It was really not an easy process. Not only was it cold physically, but there was a lot of different issues going on. You can't do this, you can, So it was hard. It was really a difficult thing, and I kept saying, I want us to learn how to communicate better. And I was always looking and praying for a way, how could we learn how to really communicate better personally to make more peace? And my prayers were answered only more recently when I just started studying NVC, nonviolent communication. So it only took me 24 years or whatever to find what I was looking for then. And I would pray for it, and I would talk to people about it. We have to learn how to be more conscious of, including me. I had things set up, and I was in a whole different mindset after having a very difficult winter, spring time, and I ran a lot of errands, and I helped with a newsletter, and I helped do a lot of things, and I think people didn't see me doing that because other people kind of maybe were in charge of it, but I did huge parts of it. In fact, sometimes when I did things, somebody else they'd come up and say, "Oh, great job," to someone else, and like I hadn't done, and I did a lot. I did a real lot. I was part of Albany meetings and organizing lots of things, and I really tried. So I was doing a different role. And so by the time I came back to the summer of '04, I was more in a mindset of I need to be more playful. I needed to not work, 75 hours a week or whatever I was doing in the 83, that is. And I remember like Anne Valentine, I remember she said, "Twilight, I've never seen this side of you before," because I was really very playful and I don't know, even helping write songs and just whatever, singing and out, and there was a whole other side of me. I wasn't as I had kind of really broken out of kind of a serious workaholic mode, and plus I needed something really different after that winter and spring.
Were you in the healing room again?
I was in the healing room again, yes. Yeah, and I had set it up so it was a little more self-sufficient, although I definitely did staff it. But I had set it up a little more self-sufficiently. I had things written out. I had tinctures made, a little more clear. Things were more organized. People were coming and going out of there, and I could be found. I was accessible. Yeah, we had all kinds of medicines in stock there, which many of them we weren't supposed to have actually, but that nurses had brought. And there were some times I had called doctors to consult with them about cases, and nurses. Anyway, there was, in a way, running the herbal room was my own act of civil disobedience because it actually isn't legal. Well, being an herbalist and having medicines, although I didn't bring them, although people would help themselves, it was mostly a very self-service oriented kind of clinic. It was a very alternative. It was extremely alternative. Yeah, people would get their own things, or they'd read up, or I'd have some things written about, this herb is good for cramps or whatever it was. And yeah, so I was being radical there.
And encouraging people to
empower themselves to their own health, encouraging people to find alternative healing and medicines, and there were some masseuses that helped, and people did some energy healing, and there was a water well in the back of the land that was dug, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 240 feet deep. And you could take the cap off it and sing in it. It was really beautiful. It was amazing. So I would play with sounds with it and just play. And I actually had a flute and I played it in the well, and I made a recording of it. And it sounded beautiful. Not that I'm the great flautist, but it had this echoing, 240 feet. So we did this whole little ritual of singing, healing. We made up some kind of healing song. Was that 84?
Yeah.
Because where did they dig for the clay in 83? Because I made clay in 83.
They were digging the ditch down to put lines to.
Okay, then maybe the clay wasn't from the well.
It wasn't.
But there was a big pile from a digging. But anyway, yeah, we played in the well, and I remember having that tape for a while, and I used to play it in my car, of the singing and playing the flute. And I would do that once in a while. I would go to the well and just sing into the ground. It was very powerful. It felt very powerful. It felt like we were just on another planet. Yeah, and we did. We all sang and sort of prayed in the well. In fact, I guess I'm the one that started doing it. I think I am, because and I don't know that anybody else ever did it, but I used to go there and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like my meditation. Just to do this well singing.
Right.
You know, it was a metal pipe, and it just had the most beautiful sound, and of course water at the end. But I love sounds and making noises like that, and yeah, it was a very creative time. It was very empowering. I remember meeting a woman who said that she didn't realize that she never talked because her husband barely let her talk, and that she was the first time she ever had a voice was being at the peace camp. I remember somebody else saying that she never knew how to use a hammer and nail, and she was just phenomenally empowered, that she didn't know how to toenail until she came, and that she felt different about herself, and doing the physical kind of labor that we all did was very empowering to be part of that. I did a little bit of plumbing.
Right. In the second summer, we were
Yeah, in the
putting
second
shitters,
summer,
so we
I
did
helped.
a lot of hard labor.
Yeah, we did
Plus
labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I did some plumbing, digging ditches. Got some strength, and then we played and swam. And I was more balanced in '04. That I was not so uptight like in nursing school anymore. Wow.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about doing rituals at the peace camp. I saw a lot of magic. It was probably the most spiritual thing I'd ever really experienced in my life thus far. It was very profound. I felt like any of the books or any of the photographs did not show the real depth, the real magic, the real profundity of what was really going on spiritually, with ritual, with magic, with empowering women, with getting in touch with things, the circles that went on, the sweats, the fire walks, even some ritual art that had been going on, like moving rocks around or whatever all night long, or the magic of watching things. In fact, I saw a UFO at the peace camp. Me and Natalie from Vermont both saw this UFO one night, and so many things went on. The walks at night and the stars, but really more about the rituals, the healing garden. I never felt such a sense of spirituality and community. It was very powerful, and really coming into that, I felt like we could do anything. That's why I felt like we could turn the lights off at the base, or I felt like we could do anything. I never saw how powerful women were until then. And I already was a feminist. I'd already had a minor in women's studies, and been studying lots of things, and swore I wouldn't get married when I was 5, when I was in kindergarten. Because I never wanted a man to treat me like my father treated my mother or whatever. I never wanted to be dominated like that. But I never saw firsthand that kind of magic. And if there's another book or something that comes out that strong, I really hope that it really captures that, the light that was there, the power. I almost can't even put it to words. I was arrested and went onto the airstrip in '84 with Leanne and an affinity group, and actually was chased around by a helicopter on the airstrip. I remember the helicopter dipping down where I thought, my God, that looked like it could have even almost hit us with its propeller, because it was going like this, It was chasing us around, but that was another empowering, magical time, because by then I already felt like we have magic. So we get arrested, we get put onto the bus, and I said to everybody, let's stop the bus. Everybody, let's stop the bus. Imagine us, stop the bus, stop the bus, stop the bus. And we were like, imagining the bus. And the bus got completely stuck in the mud, and they couldn't move it anywhere. And I remember also from that action that Leanne was so powerfully talking to one of the guards, not just talking about wailing and crying and saying we don't want war, and Leanne was crying, and she was so incredibly passionate, emotional, and that I saw a guard standing there with a gun, a rifle on his shoulder, attention, and I saw him start to cry. He was crying because Leanne was touched him so deeply. And I was like, wow, I wonder what the consequences of something like that, to touch someone's life that powerfully. So I was happy to have finally taken an action and overcome my I was probably terrified, actually, to go over the fence. Not just afraid. It was easier for me to be in the healing room. And we went to the airstrip. We climbed the fence. There were maybe 7 or 8 of us. And we went and sat in a circle on the airstrip. And they came pretty darn fast. They were there in minutes of us being there. And then they chased us around with a helicopter on the airstrip. I think it was when we were just gotten over. It might have been that we'd just gotten over before we sat down. I think from the fence you had to run over, and then a helicopter came. Like within a minute or two, a helicopter. They probably were tracking us even as we were climbing over, and the helicopter came very immediately. So they were kind of chasing us before we sat. It was scary. It's like, what a scary first action to. They came and made us sit there for a little bit and called a bus in, and then a bus came, and then they handcuffed us and they stuck us on this bus, and then I did that thing of like, let's stop the bus. And the bus driver was kind of pissed off, and he could not get it. They had to actually take us out of that bus and put us in something else. They could not get it moving. They could not budge it. And then we went to the holding center and were processed. And we were there for hours. Probably till late at night, I think. And then we got out that night. It was maybe like almost midnight, I think, when we got out. And I remember I was kind of scared, and I went with Leanne, and she had cut herself, so she had asked for medical attention, so then they separated her or something, and so I was kind of upset because then I didn't see her for hours and hours and hours. Like, we were arrested together, but then she left immediately, and she didn't tell me she was going to do that. And so I was really terrified to go. I had been really terrorized a lot in my childhood from my father, and I'd always been not as assertive. And so the peace camp started to help me learn to be more assertive. And it's kind of funny because I'm still learning more pieces of that even now at 53. Because there's part of me that's kind of a wimp. But that really started me to face my fears and do things that I wanted to do. Like, one of my dreams from childhood was to go to India. And I never thought I would do it. I just never thought, financially, emotionally, and my biggest fear was I'd get there and I'd be ill and I'd be alone and it would be horrible, and actually that's what happened. And I had to face my death, and I had to face that I could die, and I stayed. And I don't think I would have stayed had I not been at the peace camp. I stayed and got to the other side, so I had 1 month of pure hell, and then I had 3 months of pure heaven. And it was because of the processes at the peace camp that I could get to the other side of that. And I'd had a client who had gone to India who had the same kind of experience and was terrified, and then she went home and got cancer and died. And I felt that if I didn't stay and do that, that I would have died from cancer. I went around December, January 85, but it was right after the 84, and then I spent actually the fall of 84 at the peace camp, and then I went to India. And I remember I was broke, I had no job, in a broken down car, and it was like, how am I going to go to India? How is that possible? But I did.
And how did you make it possible?
Well, I just made a decision that I'm going to make some money, and if I make a certain amount of money the next 5 weeks, that I could go. And I made exactly that amount in that 5 weeks, doing astrology readings and doing some nursing jobs, and then I went.
How much was that amount of money that you took with you? Do you remember?
$800.
$800, Mike. And you spent 5 months?
And I had some left over when I came home. I had actually several hundred.
Huh? Did you go to Greenham?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did go to Greenham. I remember really idolizing the women there and feeling like they were amazing, and what I had done was so cushy compared to what they were doing, in that they lived in their little benders that they had to make every day because the police would come in and take them apart, and they were just living on nothing. And wow, I thought maybe I'd sacrificed in 83, but I had it. We had it cushy at the peace camp compared to somebody storming in and stealing all their belongings or sleeping bags or whatever that they, books or personal items, and as well as losing their homes. So they would lose their homes daily. And I went. Leanne had organized it. We had contacted someone at a Peace Center, and they were driving there, and the one at the Peace Center said that she'd had this tree that she wanted to donate to Greenham, and a woman there, I don't know if I'm remembering this exactly correct, but I think a woman there, her friend had just died, and she was wanting to plant a tree in her honor, and we showed up with a tree that was planted for this little ritual for this woman's. And she was like, I can't believe you just came, you showed up with a tree, which was what she wanted. So we helped plant this tree. But I was not at Greenham very long, and it actually scared me a lot. It was still very scary for me that. And even where we had camped, women said, you shouldn't camp that far. You have to really be on top of each other, or you could be in danger by yourself over there. It's like that's too dangerous. And I think I didn't quite grasp that it was that dangerous, and it still triggered a lot of different fears in me, because I had been very terrified in my childhood. I mean, afraid that I grew up with that. And I realized when Carolyn Mao went to, when she went to Nicaragua, and I got very in touch with that, why I couldn't go to Nicaragua. And because I thought about it, and I wrote her a long letter about it, although she said she never received it, that I had already had so much. I felt like I grew up in war, that I grew up in a war, that I grew up with my father terrorizing me and traumatizing me, and all of a sudden I would be grabbed by him or yelled at, or he'd come in and he'd be violent or grab my hair and pound me against the wall, or all of a sudden all kinds of things would happen very suddenly and shockingly. And so I wrote her a letter about how I was thankful that she could do that kind of peace presence, but that I could not live with the thought of that any second I could have a bomb, or I could have a raid, or I could be terrorized, or because I grew up with that day after day, year after year, I could not do that, which was also why it was hard for me to do the kind of actions at the peace camp that everyone was also doing, because I just had too much terror, and that was terrifying. So it was especially strong for me to climb the fence, to go to the airport of the airstrip, as it were, at the camp. But Greenham was over the edge for me. It was too much for me to do. It was still too much. It was a lot. I mean, I was really glad I went, and I was really glad I had that experience, and I totally honored the women. And I'm like, you're right. We had cream puff compared to what they have to do and what they did, and I'm so thankful they did that. I'm not sure there were too many summers I wasn't at the camp. So in some ways, when I would go away and come back, it was wonderful. In other ways, it was also hard because everything would be changed. Like an altar I'd had was, a copy machine was put there where I had an altar, or different things would be like, wow, I'd have to really let go of my personal attachments. And it's always a lesson in my life, and the camp definitely offered that, being continually changing, continually having different people, different styles, sometimes the camp would be a mess, and I'd be like, wow, this is a public place, and I was hoping it would be kept up a little more with neatness, or not. I'm not fanatical at all, but I was like, piles of dirty laundry around, and I had trouble with some people's style of it was kind of challenging, and I had to look at my own control issues. And so yeah, I was there in 80. I don't know that it's to do with 85, but it was the subsequent years, maybe even after that. But in 85 there was, you were there, Hershey, and it was a lot of creativity, and it was wonderful to have all the music and the singing, and it was much more playful, and continued to be profoundly spiritual, and a beautiful integration of spirituality, empowerment, and politics. And just a sense of community. That was really maybe even the most important to me of all, that sense of community. And it was always like coming home. And were Otter and Elliot there then, or in and out, or not yet? Not till maybe 6 or 7, 87. Yeah. Anyway, it was just wonderful. I loved meeting people that came in and out of the camp, and I kind of started to come in and out of the camp. And in 86, I spent some of the summer in Europe, and I met some of the peace camp women over there. Ta and Hans, and stayed in Amsterdam and Akalai, I think it was called, the Women's Traveling Center. And Robin met me over at in Amsterdam, and that was just another continuation of my opening from the peace camp, that I can travel, I don't have to be a rich woman. It was really hard, and I'll say something about 84, is that we just put this letter out that we had all this extra money, because that was what the agreement was in order to keep the peace camp, was to disperse the extra money. So everyone thought the peace camp was rich, and we dispersed the extra money, and then the peace camp was impoverished, basically. So we were giving out grants and needed donations almost simultaneously. So there was some sort of weird schizophrenic thing going on in 84 that was happening about that. So then afterwards, we were like, especially, 85, and they were like, well, weren't you giving out money? Don't you have, like, why didn't you keep it then? And so there was a lot of misunderstanding, or we're not giving you money because women are just here doing drugs or whatever. And I saw very, very, very little of that, frankly. I saw a lot of dedication, a lot of work, a lot of greeting visitors, hearing about other people's actions, a lot of sharing, and a lot of really powerful integration of different lives coming there. So money was difficult, or, whenever I came, I would bring bags of food, beans, or whatever, vegetables, or I didn't stay as much past the first couple of years, I don't think. I mean, I was there in and out and stayed for chunks of time, but not months. I did a chart, an astrology chart for the peace camp, and I saw it as in the chart that there was a death aspect. And so when I did a reading of the peace camp, which I think someone recorded at one point, I said the camp needs to transform or die. And so that's how this slogan started. It was a big deal of transform or die, and I didn't really mean it to take off and run, but gotta watch your words sometimes. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we were given 3 years of taxes, but no other money and no other, and after 83. It was always a struggle, and we were doing different things, and people were donating little bits, and it was more on a shoestring. There was a meeting that said we need to tear down the house and close the camp. And I started crying. And I remember, I think it was Cindy Sangri said, well, you're just sad about, you're sad about the healing room. And it's like, no, I'm just sad that women who rarely have this, that we were doing magic there, and there was still magic being done there, and that I didn't want it to go. I didn't want to lose the house, and that a lot of women don't have houses, and it was hard for me to think about not having that house. We talked a lot about it, and then people started to change their attitude a little bit, I think. The outcome was we weren't going to get rid of the house. And I think I said that I would not block consensus, but that I strongly opposed it. So it got people thinking and moving, and so some things happened, and we decided to keep the house, at least for then. And yeah, it's been a struggle, financially. It was kind of a burden, and it was a wonderful sense of community. And the problem is we probably needed a city a little closer to be support to the peace camp, and to honor the work that's there, not just see it as a bunch of women hanging out and why should we give them money. Because the richness of the conversations, the emotional processes, I remember some women came there just to heal. Some women who'd been raped, one woman came to have some time to heal, and so it just is. And the wonderful songs, the wonderful spiritual rituals, the wonderful sisterhood that was there. Even though there were problems, definitely a lot of problems at times in personal interaction. This one doesn't like that one, and or how to decide things, or are we gonna have meat or not, or in the house, or there were always lots of personal things to decide and work and struggle with, and even as I said, how clean is the house or not, or can you keep your personal stuff all over the floor, or
Common space versus
common
personal
space. So it was always the political versus the emotional that was a problem, or it was a lot of working through, and it took a lot of time to figure out. I don't know if we ever resolved it, but at least these were things that were being addressed, and we had to work with it. What I found the most valuable was to hear women's stories and to get empowered and feel supported by each other, and a camaraderie, and sitting around the fire. Or I started drumming there a little later, but I had been a drummer well before. I started drumming a little bit in the 70s, actually. But it was just felt like I could be myself there more than anywhere. Maybe more than anywhere in my life, maybe ever before, and I'd have to think about it if it's ever since. I'm not sure. That's quite an awesome thing to have. And for me, I love to support the women to go cut the fences or sneak in there and leave objects in the base or whatever, and I'd be like thrilled about it, but I didn't have a calling to do that. Yeah, I got a phone call. I was in California, I believe, and I think I'm still grieving it. To go there today was still grieving it. It feels like maybe the last time that I'll probably ever be on that land. So there's a certain grieving and overwhelm, and I think I did cry once, not today, but when I found out, I was pretty upset, and I wanted to fight for it, but it's probably because I'm a diehard, and I guess I have to let go because I'm not there fundraising for taxes or finding lawyers, and so, I want it, but I'm not doing the work to keep it, and so it was like, okay, pretty much nobody else was, so it's time to let it die and transform, and I'm still a little sad about it. Like I was today, seeing the camp and seeing remnants and feeling some loss, and it's more about almost like, well, I wonder if future generations will ever have something like that, and I think that's what's sad to me. Is not my personal sadness and loss is also there, of course, but it feels like what we had there, I don't know if anybody will have again in the future, and the opportunity to have that kind of space, to be that in touch with one's power of magic and spirituality, or the coming together of different minds on thinking about classism and racism and sexism and homophobia, and really dealing with those issues head on in a community where it's not just a class where I wrote down these things, or I had a little 2 hour, there was my 2 hours on it, or 1 hour. It was days and days and weeks, and then it became months, and then it's really years, and it was really a growing, learning, healing, profound process that is almost hard to put into words. And that's what it was about more. To me, I didn't need to go cut a fence wire, but I'm cutting my own inner fences And other women are cutting their own fences of what they needed to heal, and whether it was emotional scar or politically feeling terrible about what's going on in their community or in our nation or our world. And just giving the space to have that, to live with it, not just visit it. I think that's what the Peace Camp was for me, to be able to live a more integrated life and be challenged about awareness on every level, spiritually, herbally, politically, look at our own racism, sexually. Certainly I had to face all kinds of things, my own fears, my own anger, my own control. I mean, it was personally, it just was a growing process. So I wish everyone could have something like that in their life. And I wouldn't be a quarter as empowered as I am now if I hadn't had that experience. Well, one night a big windstorm came in my
I see that. I like that segue.
tent. My tent blew from the stakes. It blew off. The top blew off, and the stakes in the bottom were left.
It split?
It split. It was like my house blew in the air. It's like
Like the Wizard of
Oz. And the wind began to switch, and then to twitch.
Keep going.
To unhitch, and then the witch went riding with her broomstick, thumbing for a hitch. Oh, what happened then was rich. Okay, here we go. I'm temporarily indisposed, so leave a message at the tone and I'll get back to you. I have a Mars in Cancer. I'm sensitive. There's no message like your message when you call on the phone. Everything about it is appealing. Everything about it is quite sweet. Go ahead and leave a message at the end of the beep. I do all kinds of impersonations.
And she's like,
You never called her on
I'm an
the
impersonator.
corniest of all.
Yeah.
Which one do you want to hear?
Changes them all the time. Bob Dylan.
All right.
Wait, is this one?
Leave a message on the phone. I do believe I'm not at home, but I want your call. If you had to go, I'll call you back before it's too late. And you can blame it on your simple twisted fate.